Honestly, it's a good thing I took notes because I don't even know where to start. So much happened during the month of May. We have a lot to talk about today. Let's go. Minasan konnichiwa, Ali desu. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Ali and today we're gonna do my May study recap. So if you guys don't know, this year in 2024, I'm doing a monthly recap of all the language study I do every single month. And so far there are 4 videos on my channel covering the first 4 months of the year, of course. So if you're interested to know about progress I've been making since January this year in all 3 of my languages, Japanese, Chinese, and Russian, I encourage you guys to go and watch these 4 videos first, and then you can come back and watch today's video. So my recap videos usually have 4 main elements. We first cover what my monthly goals were for my language learning and whether or not I completed them. Then we go over each of my 3 languages and we talk about my monthly highlights for each of my languages. Then we talk about what kind of active studying I've been doing for each of these languages. And then lastly, we talk about immersion, what kind of immersion I've been doing, and what were my thoughts about the immersion I've been doing. So without further ado, let's get started. And let's start with my monthly goals for the month of May. Right, so let me put my glasses on and let's start. My first monthly goal for the month of May was to assess my level in Russian, which I did and which I will talk about in more details later in this video. But I was able to assess my level in Russian up to some extent. My second goal was to assess my level in Mandarin Chinese. That I completed 100%. I first assessed my level against what is required to be known for HSK3 level, and then I moved on to HSK2 level, in fact, and that also prompted me to revise my goals for the year with Mandarin Chinese. So I will talk about that again in more details later in this video. And then my last goal, the last but not the least, was to do more immersion and less social media. I've been definitely having an issue with my consumption of social media. I think we all have this issue nowadays. But this was more a reminder for myself than a goal per se. I did manage to consume less social media during the month of May, so I was very happy there. But, you know, I think it is something that I want to keep in mind for the rest of the year and then just going forward from now on. I was definitely struggling with my mental health in April, which led to more and more consumption of social media. And then I realized that at the end of April. So for May, I made it a goal for myself to just be more conscious of the time I spend on social media, especially YouTube. In my case, I don't really doom scroll, for example, on Instagram or TikTok. I don't have TikTok, I don't have Twitter. I mostly use Instagram and YouTube, a lot more YouTube than Instagram. In fact, I spend hours per day watching stuff on YouTube. It's definitely my number 1 social media platform, and for good reasons and also for bad reasons sometimes, because I use it as a coping mechanism when I feel bad, when I struggle with my mental health, when I feel anxious, when I need to rest. All of these trigger me to watch a lot of YouTube videos. I'm sure you understand what I'm saying. So in May, my idea behind this goal was really to be more conscious about the time I spend purely consuming media on social media, especially YouTube, versus the time I spend doing immersion. And I think it was just a matter of balance there, and I rebalanced the time I spend doing those 2 things. I still consume social media, but I also increased the number of hours I spent consuming media for language immersion practice in all 3 of my languages. In fact, significantly more time, a lot more hours, and that's been great. So I think this goal is definitely completed. However, this is really something that I want to keep focusing on for the rest of the year, and definitely for as long as it will be required for me to remind myself of. So you'll be hearing a lot more about this. I think it is definitely a topic we need to address, all of us together, and hopefully we can all support each other and grow towards less use, less consumption of social media and more useful consumption of social media. That makes sense. All right, so now let's start on the language by language study recap. Alright, so for Japanese. For Japanese, my active studying recap is mostly composed of the kanji studying I've been doing. So I've been doing focused study on my kanji characters this year altogether because I've been using the Shinkansen Master textbook for N1 level kanji since the end of last year. In fact, I started that textbook in December last year and I've actually come to the end of that textbook. So I pushed through a lot more during the month of May because I wanted to finish that textbook and move on to new textbooks because I have a lot of textbooks for Japanese study this year. I want to cover at least a few of them this year. So I definitely was consciously going through the Shinkansen Master a lot faster in May to make sure I would reach the end by the end of the month, which I did. However, when the month ended, I still had the last part of the textbook to cover. So today I'm filming this video you're watching on the 6th of June and I actually finished that textbook yesterday. So it took me a few more days to properly finish the textbook, but I will do a brief review of the textbook in my June recap since I didn't end up finishing the textbook in May. But what I can tell you for the month of May is that since I've been covering that textbook and, spending more and more time with that textbook because I wanted to cover it faster, I've seen a huge improvement actually in my reading comprehension of kanji characters, especially during my reading immersion practice. A lot of the kanji I was struggling with before, until that point, I didn't struggle with anymore. So I guess it was just a matter of getting proper input from a textbook, specifically that textbook, because the Shinkansen Master is probably the most comprehensive textbook out there for each aspect of the language. So definitely getting to the end of that textbook rather fast during the month of May helped me with my general comprehension of more advanced kanji. So in that sense, it was definitely very helpful and I'm happy I did that. Now, regarding reading immersion in Japanese for the month of May, well, in May, I actually read a lot. In terms of volume, in May, I read much more than I read the previous month in Japanese. I definitely felt an improvement, especially when reading novels. So I finished the Murakami short story collection I was reading, Men Without Women. And I also started and made very good progress into the Korean science fiction novel I've been reading, If We Can't Go at the Speed of Light. This has been amazing. It is challenging me a lot because the vocab is quite advanced, but like I said right before that, my active studying practice has been so helpful that actually I don't feel that it's that challenging. It would have been way more challenging for me to read that even just a few months ago. So I'm really seeing like significant improvements in my recognition of advanced vocab words. And just in general, I've been loving reading that novel. So if you're enjoying reading something, you're definitely more engaged with the material. So you're going through it much faster and with a lot more interest. So that's what's been going on with reading that novel in particular. If you're interested to know about exactly what I read every month in Japanese, mostly because I mostly read in Japanese, like 99%, I actually do monthly recaps of everything I read every single month on my Instagram account. Up until book 100, I did a review per book on my Instagram account, so you can still find that on my Instagram account. You just need to scroll down a little bit. And then once I passed book 100, which was last year, I started doing recaps per month of all the books I would read and then giving you guys highlights only on my reading month. So that's what I've been doing since the beginning of 2024. So if you're interested, you can definitely check this out to get all of the details. Now, regarding listening immersion for Japanese, in fact, this is where I saw the most significant improvement in May and so far in 2024 for that matter. So first of all, I found very, very interesting videos to watch to do my technical listening immersion practice, especially a few videos on astrophysics. So these videos are interviews. These videos were absolutely amazing. You guys know I have a special interest in astrophysics, and especially this year I upgraded my general vocab level in Japanese in the field of astrophysics, because I've read a few books now about astrophysics in Japanese, so I've got all of that vocab. It's in my head. But then it was my first time properly listening to an interview about astrophysics in Japanese, and it was surprisingly easy to understand, which I was extremely happy about. And on top of that, these videos really helped me with my overall comprehension of Japanese men talking, especially with each other. Japanese men tend to speak a lot faster and they tend to articulate a lot less.
立ち上げたシミュレーションの確率の方が高いみたいなことを言ってる人たちがいるんですが、先生はどう思われますか？
それはね、わからないっていうのがいやだからサイエンスになるかっていうのは結構大事なんですよね。
シミュレーション仮説が。
So in general, understanding men speaking in Japanese is a lot harder than understanding women. To some extent, of course, depends on the circumstances, depends on the people, but in general, I find it's more difficult. And so these videos definitely help me in that area too. All of that combined made for an extremely intensive listening practice that went very well and which yielded a lot of great results for me. I think that's it for Japanese. Overall, I am happy with my progress in Japanese, but I want to do more. Like, it's not enough. I still feel like I need to make much more significant progress in Japanese if I want to hit my targets for the year. So we'll talk more about that in future videos, definitely. Alright, Chinese now. Oh my gosh, guys. I had this urge at the end of April to assess my level because I finished the 中国語入門 textbook. And then once I was done with that textbook, what happened is that, I focused a lot more on my reading immersion practice using the Do Chinese app. And then doing that, if you recall, I realized that I was able now to read intermediate level stories on Do Chinese, which made me think that probably my level was much higher than what I thought it was, especially concerning my input level, so what I was able to understand in Chinese, especially in written form. So I thought to myself, okay, so that may be a good time now to self-test, because you need to assess what your level is to understand where you should head to next. And one of my concerns with self-learning languages is that I would get bored at some point, because if I get bored, that is the worst thing that can happen to me, simply because it means that my motivation level is only going to go down from that point on. So I'm always making a conscious effort to not get bored and prevent that state of boredom. So that's what usually triggers me to self-assess and understand where I'm at, what my level is, to keep challenging myself and making sure I maintain my motivation levels. So that's exactly what I did for Mandarin Chinese. In May, I started with an HSK3 level test, so a mock exam, which I found online. And I was planning on doing actually a few mock exams for HSK3 level, but then I did that first one and I got an almost perfect score. I got a 95%. So I was like, okay, I guess there's no need to do more than one. I know that I'm probably way above that level now. So then I moved on to HSK2 level, in fact. And so I got a mock exam, just same exact process, got a mock exam, went through it on the last day of the month of May, so on the 31st, and I got an 86%. Now, 86% is not an almost perfect score, and I definitely made a few mistakes there, and definitely I struggled a lot with my listening comprehension, which is understandable because that's what I've been doing a bit less. I've been doing more reading immersion than listening immersion, so that's completely understandable. However, that was very useful for me to understand, because now I know that this is definitely what I need to improve on, and if I can improve on that, then I can definitely move on to HSK3 level stuff. So it was overall very helpful for me to understand all of that, so I was very happy to have done that self-assessment. It prompted me to revise my goals for Chinese, which I shared with you guys in details in this video, so if you're interested, you should definitely check this video out. Let's move on to my active studying recap. So in May, I actually started a new study resource. I shared that with you in detail in this weekly vlog if you're interested. Everything I did for Chinese that week I filmed and explained to you guys, so if you're interested, please give that a watch. So I started this new resource, 基礎から学べる初めての中国語文法. So it's once again a resource that has as Japanese as source language, because I can now tell you with confidence that I will probably learn this language and study it, like for the most part, through the Japanese language. Because first of all, I live in Japan, so Japanese language resources for Chinese are much more widely available than English language Chinese resources. That's definitely easier for me to find. And then my level in Japanese is high enough to use the laddering method. And then the third reason for me to use Japanese is simply because it's actually helping me make sense of Chinese a lot more than if I were studying the language through English or even French. It's just so helpful because both languages are so similar. It's way more understandable for me to study Mandarin Chinese through Japanese, so I don't see why I should prevent myself from doing it. So those are the main reasons. Anyway, that textbook has been amazing so far. I'm going through it pretty fast because every notion that is explained in there I've already seen in the HSK 中国語入門 textbook. However, it's really helping me crystallize that knowledge. It's not going to waste at all. Even some of the notions that I've been struggling with when covering them with the HSK textbook, I now have a much more solid grasp of them thanks to this new textbook that I'm using, because they explain the concepts and the grammar rules in different ways, so it's always useful for me to get different explanations of the same thing. That's the same method I have used for Japanese, in fact, so I know that this works on me. I like having a few different explanations of the same concepts, the same grammar points in particular, so that's been really helpful in that aspect. And then the second thing it's been really helping me on is to test my Chinese level, actually, because there are exercises, very useful ones, at the end of each lesson, and I've been going through them very diligently because they are great, actually. They are mainly translation exercises, translation from Japanese to Chinese and then from Chinese to Japanese, and either way, it's really helping me progress fast with my Chinese, making me progress in how I make my sentences, whether I understand correctly the Chinese I'm reading. Translating it to Japanese is a great practice for me. Overall, I'm very happy with this textbook. I'm going to be finishing it during the month of June, so overall it will be a very short period of use. Now, regarding my reading immersion in Chinese, I actually started reading my first book in Chinese, so you guys know that this was part of my yearly goals with the language, so I'm very happy there. I started it when I realized that the stories on Do Chinese were getting too easy for me, so I thought that this was the right time for me to start on my first book, and I was right. So this is 中国語でちょっといい話. Once again, this is a book that has a Japanese source language. So this is a bilingual book in Japanese and Chinese. So it has 2 chapters. The first chapter is focused on Chinese origin stories. There are very short stories, okay? And then the second chapter is more about world stories translated to Chinese. And then for each story, you have a Japanese translation at the end. So I usually go through the Mandarin Chinese alone, trying to understand as much as I can, and then I read the Japanese translation, making sure I understood everything. It's been going great. This book is actually aimed at HSK3 level and also Chuken level 3, so the equivalent, almost equivalent of the HSK exam in Japan, so the Chuken, Chugokugo Kentei. It means that actually this level is a bit higher than the current level I have, so that's perfect because it's challenging enough, and actually I'm not having that much trouble understanding the stories I'm reading, so I guess that was the perfect book I could get for that. On Do Chinese, I have read a lot as well during the month of May. One thing I can tell you is that finally I felt comfortable removing the pinyin on all characters. So you have this functionality on the app where you can remove the pinyin on all characters except on the special characters, so the more difficult characters. So I ticked that, and I'm very happy I did it because that has helped me with my overall reading immersion practice. I feel much more comfortable now reading in Chinese overall with the correct pronunciation, because doing that prompted me to recall the readings on my own, and I've been able to do that. So I guess I reached that level now where I can read the most common characters on my own without the help of the pinyin. I'm slowly making my way to full reading immersion immersion in Chinese without pinyin, with just normal reading materials. Very slowly getting there, but getting there nonetheless. Right, so listening immersion. In May, I continued watching the vlogs that I usually watch, so mostly from Vicky Soups. I love her content. I basically watch every vlog that she posts. Regardless of the topic, I just watch all of her videos. I get a lot of listening immersion practice thanks to her.
开拍这个照片约了很久了，终于要实现了。就算是他2岁生日的一个留念吧，会给他拍个照。星期六，也就是他生日的当天，可能我们早上我跟迪伦会再给他小小的庆祝一下。
I'm very grateful. On top of that, because I went through the HSK mock exams, I of course got listening immersion practice from that too. And I was happy to see that for the HSK1 level, I had no comprehension issues at all. Like, I could understand basically 100%, so that's great. That's a huge improvement. I think same time last year, I wasn't able to understand even one single word in Chinese, so that's a huge improvement. For HSK2, however, it was a bit more difficult, like I said earlier, so I was still able to understand quite a lot. However, to understand what I could understand, I had to concentrate so hard, especially on the exercises where of course I had no visual aid, no text written, nothing, and I just had to listen to the audio without being able to go back on the audio, because during the actual test you don't go back on the audio, you know, you can't just stop the exam and tell the guy, oh, sorry, can we go back 5 seconds? So I put myself in real conditions as if I were sitting the exam, even though the audio was repeated twice each time, even though it's actually pronounced very slowly. It took my brain a lot more time to process each word and understand, oh, that's what they said. Oh, that's this word. Understand it on the spot and recall its meaning. Took me a lot more time, a lot more concentration, and there were sentences that I just didn't understand at all. So I guess that's where my level is, definitely. Again, that was very helpful for me to understand. Russian. So for Russian, I assessed my level. Well, I tried assessing my level, and I found an A1 level mock exam on internet. I printed that out and I tried going through it. It was much more difficult than I thought it would be. The level there was way higher, for example, than the HSK1, you know, in comparison, than the HSK1 level exam. So I had a lot of trouble going through that, and I couldn't even go through the whole of it because the second part is actually a conversation part, even at A1 level. So because I had no tutor to go through that with, I just couldn't do that part. So I wasn't able to fully assess my level as if I sit the level A1 of the test by myself. So I guess that's fine. I wasn't too annoyed about it, especially because I'm not in any rush with Russian, so it's fine. I can take my time and just reach A1 level when I reach it. My main purpose with, you know, going through that mock exam was just to understand where I was. It's much too soon, probably, which is fine. I was not discouraged at all by that. In fact, it gave me a lot more motivation to push through because I want to be able to understand that I'm not in a rush, but at the same time, if I can get to at least autonomous level as soon as possible, that would be absolutely great. That said, I opened Duolingo again, which I hadn't done for a few weeks for some reason. I opened it again, and you know, during the weeks that I hadn't touched Duolingo, I had been using and going through the Asimil textbook a lot, so I guess I was progressing without realizing it, because when I opened the Duolingo app again and went through a few exercises, I realized that this was like way too easy for me now. I was in the middle of section 2 of the course, and so I realized that I might just take the section 3 jump test just to see if I could make it to section 3, and I actually made it to section 3 without one single mistake. It doesn't mean much, I mean, especially since Duolingo is just reshaping their course like every 2 days, so it doesn't really matter. A few weeks before that, I was struggling with each sentence. I was very happy to see such tremendous change in my comprehension level. Just like with Chinese, based on that, I actually revised my goals for the year for Russian, because I realized that I had already completed one of my goals quite early in the year regarding my cursive handwriting, and the rest of my goals were not challenging enough for me for Russian. If I wanted to again maintain my motivation. So I revised my goals and I shared that with you guys. Right, so regarding my active studying recap, during weeks 20 and 21, I actually took a break for the first time. I took a 2-week break from the Assimil textbook for multiple reasons. The first reason was that I felt it was going a bit too fast. The pace was going a bit too fast, in my opinion. From one lesson to another, the rising difficulty was going a bit too fast. So I decided that I would just stop for a little while to just go back and review my vocab, review all of the vocab words I had encountered in the textbook so far, which I kind of did. I started doing it. I didn't go through it 100%, but nonetheless, the vocab review I did was helpful, so I was happy there. The second reason why I stopped for 2 weeks was because I had entered the second phase of the textbook, so the activation phase. The second phase of the textbook basically prompts you to go back to the first lessons in the book at the end of each new lesson. And so, for example, let's say you go through lesson 54. At the end of lesson 54, they will tell you that you need to go back to lesson 2 and look at the French translation only and translate this back to Russian to see if you can actually do it. So that's quite intense, as you can see. The activation phase is quite scary. However, I did do that for the first week of phase 2 at the beginning of the month of May, and indeed I was able to do it just like they said in the textbook. So I was happy to see that I fit their assumption. I did that for the first week. However, I quickly realized that this was taking me way longer than I was able to put in each day for Russian in terms of study time, because going through the lesson alone, it was taking me 30 to 45 minutes, and then going through the translation exercise after that was taking me at least another 20 minutes. So overall, a 1 hour session, 1 hour plus for Russian every day was a bit too much for me. So that's also why I stopped for 2 weeks, because I needed to also reassess how I would go through the textbook from now on. And I was able to figure this out. So at the end of the 2 weeks, I restarted using the textbook and I went through another full week. And during that week, I went through the lessons only without going through the translation exercise at the end. And what I did instead, and which was much better, was to sum up all of the translation exercises and do them separately at a separate time during the week. So not necessarily after doing the daily lessons. That makes sense. So for instance, I used 2 study sessions during the week to go through the translation exercises for lesson 2 to 4, for example, and that took me like 40 minutes. And then another study session to go through a translation exercise for lesson 5 and 6, for example. And that was much better. So that's the first thing I've been doing. And the second thing I've been doing is that I'm not actually following what they want me to do exactly. What they want me to do in the textbook for these translation exercises is to look at the French translation part and then translate that back to Russian. What I'm doing instead is that I'm listening to the Russian audio without looking at anything, and I'm transcribing, writing down the Russian I'm hearing in Russian only. Then having written this down, translating it to French to make sure I understand what I hear in Russian, to also make sure I can write Russian without making mistakes, because spelling in Russian is a bit hard still. So that has been helping me a lot, actually, to understand Russian, to understand how it's pronounced, to know how it's written, to get more and more comfortable with my Cyrillic, of course, and then to, of course, assess whether or not I understand what's being said and whether I can translate it back to French. So that's a much better use of that part. It's not exactly what they want me to do, and I will probably also have few sessions where I do exactly what they want me to do, like how they want me to use these exercises, but I will go with the flow of what I feel is the most useful practice for me. Then for listening immersion, and that will be the last part of today's video, I've been doing a lot of listening immersion in Russian during the month of May, but not as much as what I did during the month of April. I cut this down a little bit also because I've been doing more Japanese and Chinese listening immersion, so it's of course rebalancing everything. But I was happy to see that I'm understanding more and more of what I hear when I hear spoken Russian. And I 100% think that, this is thanks to the active studying I've been doing using the Asimil textbook. It's been helping me so much to understand spoken Russian. I see really great results already. I'm getting to understand more and more with each video I watch on my own for my listening immersion practice. So I would say that now I'm at 15% of understanding probably. I still have a lot of trouble with verbs, which I think is fine because that's probably one of the most difficult part of the language. So I know it will take me a long time to digest and I'm fine with it. Like I said, I'm not in any rush with Russian. It will take the time it takes. Alright, so guys, I think that will be it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please let me know how your month went, as usual. Leave all of that in the comments if you want me to react to what you've been up to with your language learning during the month of May. And otherwise, I will see you guys in my next video on the channel. Bye bye! Matane!